So there's a few things I need to do to prepare for putting the frets in. First one is I need to cut the fret slots to their final depth, which is about 1.88 millimeters or so, 1.89. But I think I'm going to cut a little bit deeper than that just to give me some breathing room. Okay, fret slots are down to their final depth now. Before I go and put in the frets, this is my last chance to really smooth down the fretboard to a fine grit, because once those frets go in, it's impossible to kind of go this way. I'd have to go this way, and then I could end up, you know, creating scalloped shapes between each fret. So I'm going to take a little bit of 600 grit paper and go very slowly and gently. I'm not going to be taking off enough material to change the radius or the geometry of the neck at this point, just enough to kind of get it shiny and smooth. Okay, this fretboard is about as prepared as it's ever going to get. Now I need to start bending fret wire using this little doohickey. So the idea here is I take a piece of fret wire, run it through these wheels until it meets the curve that I want. But I've heard this is a bit of a dark art. I've never used one. So this one has a little bit of a groove in it for the fret tang to rest in. Well, let's give this a try. Okay, well that has put a very, very gentle curve in my fret wire. So I need to go for something a little bit more curved than that. So I guess I turn this dial towards round. Feed it through until I get the curve I want. This isn't too hard. What can go wrong? So that is, as far as I'm aware, a pretty ideal match. So the fret wire is just a little bit more curved than the fretboard I'm going to be bashing it into, and it apparently kind of spreads out and sort of seats itself in when the middle part is pushed or hammered down. So that's what I'm going for. One very last step before I put the frets in is I'm going to use this 3-corner fret file, and I'm just going to file a very slight bevel into the top of each fret slot, which apparently helps to guide the fret in a little bit. Okay, I'm doing my first test fret. Well, it's not a test fret, it's a real fret. It's going in, it's going to be the 21st fret. I figure, who really cares about the 21st fret anyway, right? Okay, so the fret press didn't really work, as you can see there. It pushed it in until the edges went in, but it didn't go any further, and it didn't seem to be able to. So, against all advice I've ever heard on how to do this, I'm gonna do this my own way. Wish me luck. Have I just invented a whole new technique on my first try? Am I a genius? No, I'm not a genius. Honestly, that fret looks really nicely seated in there. I haven't had to bash it in. I haven't had to be violent with the neck or the fretboard. Why did I buy all that other stuff for? Like, does that look good to you? Looks good to me. Feels good. I can't see any gap anywhere. It just looks really good and clean. Well, I guess that's that. I'm just going to do the rest with a cheap old vise. If you're wondering why I'm starting at this end of the neck and not down there, it's because if I screw up, I mean, I play more notes down the other end of the neck, don't I? So I figure this is less crucial. That is so good. It's time consuming, but like, what do I care? I've got all the time in the world. I just want it to be right. I've got to live with this guitar for years, so I've never seen anyone do this, and I don't know why. It just seems so logical. Why would you not do it this way? Yeah, there's absolutely no gap underneath the fret wire. It's absolutely flush with the fretboard wood. So now, something I hadn't really thought of when I started using this vise technique was how I was going to clamp it when it starts to get to the curved part of the neck here, because on the heel you've got a nice flat surface for the vise to stick to. So I'm using this little piece of wood underneath to kind of give the vise something to push against. And it seems to be working okay for now. Well, that's my upper frets done. All with a cheap old workshop clamp. Pretty happy with that. Alright, I'm about halfway through the neck now, and I've learned a few things. First of all, when I cut the slots up this end, I cut them to be the exact depth of the fret tang, maybe a little bit more. I think the fret tang is about 1.8 millimeters, so I cut these to be about 2.10. Turns out that wasn't quite enough, I think, because when the fret gets pressed into place, it actually compresses. Well, I'm not sure if it compresses the wood around the slot, but it certainly beds itself to an extent into the wood, which means that the fret slot needed to be deeper than I had thought. So now, having done these, they're all quite uneven, and I may have to pull some of them out and recut the slot and reseat them. As I've come further along, I've been doing things a bit differently in this area. I've cut these ones much deeper, 3 millimeters each. So that's over a millimeter deeper than it needs to be. And what I'm finding is that these ones are much more level. When I check them with the fret rocker, there's, in some cases, no movement at all. So anyway, these are the things I'm learning as I go, and I'm hoping I don't have to pull out many of these and redo them, because that could be a potential area of weakness. But these ones, this is the important part of the neck as far as I'm concerned, these ones seem to be going much better. So I'm going to continue. I've cut all of these much deeper now, so I'm going to continue along that line. So only a few minutes ago you saw me talk about how I was going to clamp all these in. I'm not doing that anymore, and I'll explain why. I've noticed that I've created some compression marks in the back of the neck here. I can feel them. I can't really see them unless it's in a certain light, but I can feel them. So the back of the clamp has actually compressed a couple of spots on the back of the wood here. Up until today I was using a piece of wood on the back to kind of protect the neck, but I just forgot to do it today, and now I've got a bunch of compression marks. I think there's a way to repair those though. We'll get to that, but for now I have decided to brave on with just the fretting hammer using the traditional method, and it does seem to be going okay. So I think I've sort of got the knack for it now, and I'm getting confident. 1, 2, 3, 4 left. Remember the the toothpick indexing pin there? Well, now you can see how it becomes invisible once a fret's placed on there. Well, that is all the frets in. So now I'm just going to go back with the fretting hammer and just make sure they're all tightly seated. Okay, so in putting these frets in, I've made some dents and some marks on the back of the neck here, which I didn't mean to, and it was a bit naughty of me. So I'm going to try and steam these dents out, which I believe is a fairly common thing to do. So I'm going to, well, that's a nice colour. I'm going to wet the area first. Just stick a little bit of water into the... You can't see it, but I can feel there's some bumps there from the vise. So now I'm going to put the wet cloth over it, and I've got an iron that I've heated up, and fingers crossed. So apparently this kind of rehydrates any compressed areas of wood. Huh. Yeah, it's like a magic trick. Wow. It's also raised the grain all the way along there, which when I do final sanding, I'll have to get rid of all that, but that seems to have taken care of the bumps. Awesome. There's a couple of frets here I'm concerned about. One of them is up here at the 16th fret, that one right there. Normally you shouldn't be able to get a piece of paper under a fret like that. However, here, problem. And no matter how much I hammer it or press it in, it doesn't seem to be going any deeper. And I think it's because the fret slot was not cut deep enough for some reason. So I think I'm going to have to pull this fret out, unfortunately, and try and refret that one. So luckily none of these have been glued, so it shouldn't be too difficult. I'm a little bit annoyed with myself here because as the saw was coming out of the slot there, it's jumped out of the slot and it's caused a little scratch on the fretboard just there, which I'll have to do something about that. So the new fret, when I kind of place it in place there, I can feel the teeth kind of slide into where the teeth were before, and it's kind of got, I can feel it kind of click into place there, there, there. So I kind of need to click it into place somewhere where the teeth weren't, so that it makes a new impression. The teeth get to cut into a new piece of wood and not just kind of slot into the old weakened slots from before. So it's just common sense, really. Give it a light tap. I'm going to give this fret press here another try. Okay, so there's the newly pressed in fret. Let's test it with the paper. Yeah, okay, much better. Much better. I hope I don't live to regret this, but I've gotten a bit picky about this, and I've decided to replace 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more frets, including the all-important 0 fret. So this area of the fretboard, really I wanted it to be right, and I didn't want to have to redo it because potentially I might be causing weaknesses in these fret slots here, but I just had to do it because they weren't right. And wish me luck. This is not where I thought I would be. Okay, same process. This is the 18th fret. Looks good. These three up here are much better. I'm much happier with them now. They're much more consistent, and level and all the rest, so that's good. Now I've got to do these ones again. Okay, so now these 4 are fixed as well, and I've just checked them and they're just so much better than before. Really happy. In case you're wondering why I didn't just use the fret press to begin with, well, I did, but because it didn't go very well, I gave up on it too soon, and I should have persisted, because in the end it was a much better way to go than using the fretting hammer. So the first time I used it, I pushed so hard that it caused this flat surface here to get pushed down, because the clamp at the back here wasn't strong enough to hold it in place. So the thing that kind of fixed that was, when I finally got it to work, I actually pushed up with my hand to hold the this part in place, and when I pushed down I had sort of counter pressure. Maybe I could put some kind of jack or, you know, like a wedge of wood underneath here in the future, so I don't have to, you know, pull up with my hands. But essentially the problem was that I couldn't get enough force out of the press because this kept moving down. So once I kind of fixed that, then it was working the way it should have worked in the first place. But this is how we learn, and everything's fixed, everything's fine now, and I can move to the next step. Okay, so now that all my frets are in and I'm happy with them, the next step is to shore them up with some super glue. So normally what you would do is you'd drizzle a little bit of super glue, very thin super glue, in the gap between the bottom of the fret and the bottom of the fret slot. So you wick it in one end and it drips out the other, and it basically fills the entire slot, which basically solidifies the fretboard and makes the fret more connected to the neck. However, I'm worried about superglue dribbling all over the back of the neck or on the fretboard here and having to sand it off, which would be a lot of work. So I'm doing some test work on a piece of ebony, same ebony that the fretboard was cut from. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to put a little bit of a fret slot into this piece of ebony. It's going to be the tiniest little fret you've ever seen. Clamp that in. And I'm going to tap it in just to make sure it's solid. Trim the ends. So for all intents and purposes, that is a tiny miniature fret, because I want to test whether the super glue is going to drizzle. Super thin super glue. It's still wicking down into the hole. Usually you wait till you see it dripping out the other side. Oh damn. There we go. Finally dripped out the other side. However, looks like it's made a bloody big mess on the other side actually. Yep, that's gone everywhere. So I'll do another test fret. Okay, this time I'm going to use a lot less super glue, and I'm going to keep an eye on what's happening. Wow, that's already filled the slot, and I can see it spreading around. Just a couple of drops. I used way too much on the first time. So my next question is, any super glue that has kind of wicked out onto the fretboard, let me see if I can remove it without ruining the fretboard. Well, the answer seems to be kinda, yeah. Yeah, alright. Third try. Before my third attempt, I'm going to see if just plain old masking tape next to the fret will stop any overspill. Potentially it could just glue the masking tape to the fretboard, make it a whole big mess. Whoa, yep, that is, look at it spreading underneath the tape. So that has done nothing. Okay, fourth try. And this is beeswax, so you're normally supposed to melt it. You can actually wax pickups with this stuff when you melt it, but I'm using it in its solid form, like a paste. Looks promising. Yeah, it's reached the bottom, and I'm not seeing anything leaking out around the fret. I might be onto a winner here. Alright, well now I'll wipe off the wax and see what I get. You could say this is just another kind of mess, really, couldn't you? Sure, the super glue's not great, but then all this gunk, if it doesn't come off, is just as bad a problem as the super glue. Actually, that's pretty good. Okay, I've put in one last test fret here, and I'm trying something a bit different. This is a product called Lemon Cream, and it's essentially a paste wax. And the main ingredient in this that I'm interested in is this one here, carnauba wax. That's the stuff that's in most of the paste waxes that people use for this. And in Australia, this is the closest thing I could find at Bunnings. I think the key then is a very thin film of wax, really thin. Let it wick in. I was putting in too much super glue, so I put in much less this time, and once it had wicked in like once, maybe twice, I just wiped it off straight away, then cleaned up the excess with acetone. I think that's kind of solved the issue around the fretboard though. Keeping the fretboard nice and tidy is just doing it all a lot quicker and with a much thinner coating of wax. Alright, I'm gonna go for it. What's the worst that could happen? Okay, that has wicked underneath nicely. I probably put a bit too much on there, but let's see what it does. It is disappearing. Okay, that's fair enough. Well, so far this process is super messy, and I really don't know if it's working the way it's supposed to. I'm just trusting the method. See, despite taking every precaution, I feel like this has just made a massive mess, you know? I don't know what I've done differently to the various Stu Mac videos, and you know, like they all say the same thing: put on a bit of wax, then wick in the super glue. But I mean, look.
Wax off both sides of the fret, run a very small amount along the edge of that fret, and if you look closely, you'll see it wick underneath the fret into the slot. Sometimes it'll even come out the other side.
Do it with some Minwax finishing paste. It just creates a wax coating over the wood. Big thing is try not to make a mess.
Apply a thin layer of petroleum jelly to either side of the fret with a Q-tip. Put a drop or two of thin superglue onto one side of the fret, then use a sewing pin to spread it along the length of the fret. Wipe off the petroleum jelly and you're good to go.
What am I doing wrong? I don't know. If you try this for the first time like I am, you may go through the same issue, so hopefully I figure out what the problem is so that you don't have to go through this yourself. Okay, I've waxed up a whole bunch at once from this fret to the 11th fret, so I'm going to do these all in one hit. What a mess. So this is now where we're at. Look at all the gunk and crap all over the fretboard. Some of it's hard dried glue, some of it's wax. I don't really know which is which, but I'm going to try and clean that up now. Okay, I think I've stumbled upon a method of cleaning up the super glue that's working okay. This one here is actually pretty clean now. All the super glue that was there is kind of gone now. So I'm going to try the same method on this side here. And what it is I'm taking a piece of very fine wet and dry sandpaper. I think it's like 800 grit, so it's not going to hurt the wood or wear away too much wood, and then I just sand it. Oh, sorry, that was acetone. And the acetone and the sandpaper are basically working together to kind of get rid of any of the super glue residue that was there. The super glue just comes off in like a gummy kind of a consistency. I know the wood doesn't look very clean on the camera, but I can tell you it feels almost completely smooth again. Okay, so as you can see, this little area here that I've been working on is pretty clean now. And free from super glue residue. I might do a bit more to that, but I think this might be a good way forward for the rest of these gunky frets. So I have a feeling that there's two kinds of muck here. The yellowy kind of stuff here that looks kind of solid, that's wax, I'm pretty sure. But this stuff here that's kind of wet looking and a bit glossy and shiny, I think that's super glue. So the wax stuff has actually kind of hardened a little bit. And what I'm finding is if I just take a fret slot cleaner, it's just kind of lifting off and breaking away. So yeah, there we go, there's a big chunk that just came off. So I'm pretty sure that's the wax. The super glue stuff there, I might have to use some sandpaper on that, but I'm just trying to get as much of this wax off as I can without damaging any wood underneath. Okay, from all that work we can see a pretty big improvement now. The fretboard's a lot cleaner. There's a few sort of rubbing marks from all the paper and chemicals. Like you can see it there on the 12th fret, there's a lot of rubbing marks there, so I'll buff that out, clean it up, but all the wax, you know, seems to be basically gone now. Now I need to work on the sides of the fretboard. So once again I'm going to use a practice board here to practice my filing technique. This is a fret leveling file, but it can easily be used as a fret end leveling file. First of all, just to shave the ends down, but then to actually put a 40-degree bevel on them. I've heard the way to tell when you've reached the right depth is that the sound changes from that metal sound. Yeah, I reckon that's good now. Okay, so the 40 degrees. I guess what I'm trying to do is estimate, like, you know, it doesn't really matter that it's exactly 40 degrees as long as they're all roughly consistent and close. I think I'm just going to hold the protractor down here as a visual guide. Try and match that. I'll just do it visually. Okay. Yep, that's working. It's weird, but it works. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same exact thing on the top side of the neck.